big boy with a lot of energy and no place to vent. Hobbies every night. Just spying on the next door neighbor. I didn't expect what I saw that night. Almost scared him to death right there. Welcome to the ghost jar. It happened in 2010. I was working in Chongqing at that time. He rented a house in the suburbs because he had no money. I was in my early 20s. Even though it's exhausting during the day. But there's still a lot of energy left to vent every day. Good thing I rented a little room. On the top floor of a self-built building. There is a huge rooftop to use. So every night this becomes my gym. I was working out at the night market. Suddenly the door clicked downstairs. That tells me another compulsory lesson of the day is about to begin. It's kind of embarrassing, actually. But I think every boy has probably done it. That's voyeurism. Under the roof where I live. It's an old-fashioned bungalow. I found out the other day that there's a guy living there who probably has a 30-year-old woman. What does he do for a living? Always coming home after midnight. I think he lives alone. Never noticed anyone else going in or out. Probably because from my point of view, I can always see different scenery. Therefore, voyeurism is what fascinates me during that time. Without realizing it, I wondered who he really was. What is it? I asked the landlord a few times, pretending not to mean it. But he kept saying he didn't know. I don't know if my gaze is too hot. These days, I felt like that woman had spotted me. Looking at him secretly. I'm just looking, of course. I don't have any improper thoughts. When his eyes turned, I'd be hiding in a second. After a few days of observation, I find that the woman comes back at the same time every day. And then he never came out. It's funny looking back now. What's the point of waiting until late every night to peep? But I didn't get tired of it. A pretty long boring time. That's how I got there. A turn of events. It happened one night when I was coming back from working later. There was a rush of work at the factory that day. The boss left us to work. Didn't get home from work until after 2 p.m. Walking home down the path behind the house. Suddenly heard a very light woman. It sounded like a snort. But it's pretty obvious in the dead of night. I looked for the voice subconsciously. It was the old bungalow. My heart leapt. Isn't this the woman's house? She should have been back by this time. Why are you still up? I wonder what she's doing in the house. It's hard to keep it in check. It was late and the path was empty. I went very close to the woman's window. You'd expect to see him sleeping or taking a shower. Why didn't I think of that? The situation in the house was completely out of my expectation. The woman is in a very strange way. Different posture in the middle of the room. The head is taller. Just keep your toes on the ground. That's a pose that the average person would never be able to do. One word just popped into my head. Yeah, it's like it's hanging there by some kind of force. I gave him a million reasons to explain. Like he's doing dance or yoga. But I found that impossible. His toes don't seem to be exerting any strength at all. In the weird way I'm carrying that woman. When you're too scared to move. And suddenly there was another strange thing. The woman's chin seemed to be rising a little. Slowly her neck fell back to 90 degrees. It made my blood run colder. Then she flipped her head upside down with her chin up. A pair of red eyes were staring at me. My scalp went numb for a second. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. I gave a loud cry of fear and went backwards. Too flustered one buttocks and slumped on the ground. How can I understand what's going on? Then I remembered that he always showed up after midnight. A terrible thought arose. I stared hard at the window. I'm afraid he'll crawl out like that with his head on his back. Fortunately, what I imagined didn't happen. It gave me a deep sigh of relief. After a while I was daring to get up from the ground. My heart began to struggle to run away. I was so young then. I always feel like I can't be reconciled until I know. They say big boys are masculine. You can't really meet a ghost. Because of this idea, I somehow managed to get through that window again. Look inside. I was a little surprised that the woman had disappeared. An empty room came into view. As if there had never been anyone. Where did people go? How could it be gone all of a sudden? So I leaned over the window and looked for it carefully. Just then, suddenly something darker. Right in front of my eyes. I felt my blood run cold in an instant. The scene before me. Definitely the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. The woman had a big white face. Right in front of me. Her eyes were almost irritated by the bulging veins. The corners of one's mouth turn upward. Smiling at me in a creepy way. Her mouth grew bigger and bigger. Keeps coming towards me. As he gets closer, the pupils of his eyes are getting smaller and smaller. This sudden thrill. It made my heart skip a beat. Bright and choking back. Almost collapsed on the floor again. By this time my little courage had been frightened out of me. Screaming and turning around and running. He's a long way from here. I still feel that woman staring at me. I didn't dare go out again that night. Shivering in bed all night with my head covered. I thought I'd be better by morning. But here's the real horror. It showed up the next morning. Today is my day off because I worked overtime last night. I didn't get up until almost 10:00. As soon as I went out, I met the landlord. Probably because he heard the screaming last night. He got a little upset and asked me what the hell I was calling him last night. Of course I won't admit it. So I threw the pan. The strange woman next door. But the landlord asked me if I was crazy about women. There's no woman next door that's been empty for over a decade. Why didn't I expect that? But the landlord. You don't look like you're lying. Why no one? So what have I been seeing all this time? The cold sweat on his forehead suddenly burst out again. I moved out as soon as the lease was up. In the time that I haven't moved. I never left the house again at night. Because every night. I can't help it. That night. The way that woman fell in the air in a weird way.